and welcome, class 357. I want you to pay attention. Okay, we're going to start with François Monet, but the previous point, I want you. Mi amigo Juancho, tengo un amigo que se llama Juancho, y siempre digo, yo quiero Juancho que tú vengas. Juancho, I want you, Juancho. I want you to watch me. I want you. I want you to pay attention. I want you to study. Ahora bien, un nativo no dice I want you. O sea, enlazamos la T y la I latina, sonido y latina, you, want you. I want you. Entonces hacemos casi como Juancho. Hola Juancho. I want you, I want you to watch. I want you to pay attention. I want you to study. I want you to make an effort. I want you to do everything necessary to improve your English. And I want you to watch this program every day. I want you to watch this program every day. Okay. Point 16, page 345. Unit 31. François Monet. Huh? Il est de Paris. He's from Paris. And he is falling in love. Maybe. He's falling in love with Inés Garcia. All right. I think we have a picture here of Francois talking on the telephone. Well, he's talking on the telephone, and he's thinking about Inés, and he's imagining her as in a special way. Typical Sevillana, typical civilian girl. All right. Are you ready? François Monet is Pierre's nephew. He's 27 years old and works in a large French chemical company. He's a salesman, and he travels to many factories throughout the European Union. He often travels to Huelva, a small city not far from Seville in Spain. When he goes to Seville, he always rents a car to drive to Huelva. That's how he met Inés Garcia. They met because of a traffic accident. Francois thinks he was lucky to have the accident because otherwise he wouldn't have met Inés. Now he thinks about her every day and calls her as often as he can. He's even invited her to visit Paris. However, he's a little afraid of having a more serious relationship with her because he doesn't understand the character of the people in the south of Spain, especially in Seville. They seem like fun people who look for ways to enjoy life. But he still remembers the opera he saw several years ago called Carmen. In the opera, a young French soldier fell in love with a gypsy girl from Seville. The poor soldier had all kinds of problems. Inés wasn't a gypsy girl, but sometimes she talked and behaved like the actress who played the role of Carmen in the opera. Inés had black hair and dark eyes. Francois found her very attractive and very different from the girls in Paris. The last time he spoke to her, he invited her to visit Paris. Since then, he's called her 3 times, but her mobile phone was disconnected each time. He hopes she'll call him. All right. François Monet, if you remember, he is Pierre Monet's nephew. Nephew, sobrino, nephew. Sobrina, niece. Sobrino, nephew. Francois is Pierre Monet's nephew. How old is he? He's 27. He's 27 years old. How old is he? How old is he? How old is he? How old are you? Fíjate la D de old. How old how old are you? Como Darth Vader. Oye, Darth, ¿cuántos años tienes? How old are you, Darth? How old are you? How old is she? How old is he? How old am I? How old am I? O sea, la D la uso de bisagra o de trampolín. Pop, pop. Los hispanohablantes no lo hacéis nunca cuando habláis inglés. Pero tenéis que practicar. How old are you? How old? How old? Como si la D no existiera. The old, O-L. How old? Y luego inicia la palabra siguiente con D dura. How old are you? How old am I? How old is he? How old is she? How old are they? How old are we? How old are? How old are? Poldark. I tell you, a city se llama Poldark. Many years ago, another very popular in the 1970s. Poldark. How old are? How old are you? How old is Francois? He's 27. Does he work? Yes, he does. What does he do? He's a chemical engineer. All right. Good. Does he work as an engineer? Well, yes and no. He's a technical engineer. He's a sales engineer. He's a salesman, but he sells chemical products. He's a salesman, vendedor, but he sells chemical products. He doesn't sell pencils or tables or English courses like me. He sells technical things, chemical products. He's a salesman. Where does he work? Well, he works in a French company. What kind of company does he work in? Well, he works in a French chemical company. Se escribe chimical con che, pero al ser palabra de origen griego, la che tiene sonido de ka. Chemical, 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 chemical. So, he works in a French chemical company, and he's a salesman. Does he travel a lot in his job? Excuse me? Does he travel? Francois, does he travel? Does he travel? Does he travel? Does he travel a lot in his job? Yes, he does. He travels a lot. Where does he travel? He travels to many factories throughout the European Union. Wow. How many countries are there in the European Union? Well, now after Brexit, I think they're 27 or 26. 26? I don't know. But there are a lot of countries. And he travels to many factories throughout, a lo largo y ancho de por toda la Unión Europea, to Denmark, Germany, to Italy, Austria, the Czech Republic, Poland, Hungary, etc. So he travels all over Sweden, the European Union. He travels to many factories throughout. Through is a través de. Lo vimos ayer. Bueno, ayer no. We saw a few other. I'm looking at you through this piece of paper. Through. But throughout means por todo. All over. También se dice. So, he's a salesman and he travels to many factories throughout the European Union. Does he travel to Spain? Yes, he does. How often does he travel to Spain? I think about 3 or 4 times a year. Does he go to Madrid? No, he doesn't. Where does he go? He goes to Huelva. Why does he go to Huelva? Because there are several chemical factories in Huelva. Oh. Does he fly directly from Paris to Huelva? No, he doesn't. Why doesn't he fly to Huelva directly? Because there aren't any direct flights from Paris to Huelva. So how does he go? He flies to Seville. Seville in the south of Spain, yes. What does he do there? Well, when he gets to Seville, he rents a car. Why does he rent a car? He rents a car to drive to Huelva. Is it far? Is it far? What, Huelva from Seville? No, it's not. How long does it take? I don't know. 45 minutes? 50 minutes? An hour? It doesn't take very long to drive to Huelva. So he rents a car in Seville. That's right. Where does he rent the car? Usually he rents the car in the airport. And he drives to Huelva. He goes around Huelva, Seville. He doesn't drive through Seville to go to Huelva. But one time, about 3 weeks ago, he decided not to rent a car in the airport, but to visit the city first and to rent a car in the center of the city. So for the first time, instead of renting a car in the airport, he made a reservation from Paris to rent a car in the center of Seville. So he flew to Seville from Paris, and then he took a taxi to the center of Seville. And he spent a few hours visiting Seville for the first time in his life. Many times he had gone around Seville to go to Huelva, many times, but he had never taken the time. He had never, perfecto, nunca había tomado el tiempo. He had never taken the time to visit Seville. After maybe 10 trips to Huelva, going around Seville. So finally he said, I am going to visit Seville. And so he took a taxi from the airport to the center of Seville, and he spent about 3 hours seeing Seville, the Barrio Santa Cruz, the Parque de Maria Luisa, and the river, the Maestranza, many places, and of course the cathedral, the Giralda, and he went to see the different sites, He went sightseeing, los lugares turísticos, typical of Seville. He went into the Alphonse XIII Hotel, and there he looked across the river at the barrio, at the other areas of Seville. And finally, he went to the to the car rental agency, and he formalized the rental of the car. And he went down to the garage with the key in the car, and he pulled out, up the ramp to the street, he turned, and 20 meters later, boom, he had a traffic accident, and he met Ines. All right. So here we see that he met Ines because of a traffic accident. If he hadn't had the traffic accident, he wouldn't have met Ines. If he hadn't decided to take a taxi to the center of Seville and rent a car in Seville instead of the airport, he never would have met Ines. If he hadn't made the decision to see Seville, he wouldn't have met Ines. If he hadn't made a reservation to rent a car in Seville, he never would have met Ines Garcia. And they met in a traffic accident. Now, he thinks he was lucky. Francois thinks he was lucky. Que suerte. He thinks he was very lucky, yes, to have the accident. Porque de otra manera, because otherwise, he wouldn't have met, no habría conocido. He wouldn't have met Ines. Because otherwise, he's glad he had, se alegra de haber tenido el accidente. He's glad. He's not sorry. He's not sorry he had. No siente, no lamenta haber tenido el accidente. He's not sorry he had the accident. He's not sorry that he had the accident. Así decimos. That sobra. He's not sorry he had the accident. In fact, he's glad. Se alegra. No lamenta. He's glad he had the accident. O insertando that. He's glad that he had the accident because otherwise, curiosa palabra. He wouldn't have met Inés. Otherwise. También podemos decir if not, porque si no, no habría conocido a Inés. O sea, se alegra de haber tenido el accidente, porque si no, because if not, he wouldn't have met Inés. Ahora bien, el if not is perfect English, perfect Spanish también. Si no, no la habría conocido. Good. Pero también en español se dice, porque de otro modo, o de otra manera, no habría conocido a nuestra amiga Inés. Y en este caso, de otro modo, también tenemos un sustituto de if not, otherwise. Because otherwise, you have to study. Because otherwise, you will not improve. You need to study. You need to make an effort. You need to follow this program. You need to buy the books. Because otherwise, de otro modo, más difícil va a ser progresar. It's going to be more difficult for you to progress. Otherwise. So, Francois thinks he was lucky to have the accident because otherwise he wouldn't have met Inés. No habría conocido a Inés, pero en inglés no habría conocido a Inés. He wouldn't have met Inés. Now he thinks about her every day. Okay. Vaya. Every day he thinks about her. Siempre está pensando en ella, ¿no? He's always thinking about her. Now he thinks about her every day and calls her as often as he can. Tan a menudo, tan frecuentemente como pueda. As often as he can. Ay, pobrecito. He's falling in love. He has even, incluso. Él ha incluso invitadola, así lo decimos en inglés. He has even invited her to Paris. It's a little fast. He hasn't even kissed her yet. Yeah. Ni siquiera la ha besado todavía, ya está invitándola a París. I don't know. What's your opinion? He hasn't even, ni siquiera. He hasn't even kissed her yet. But now he's inviting her to Paris. Incluso la ha invitado. Vamos a hacer la contracción he has. He has even invited her to Paris. He has even. Contraigamos. He's even invited her to Paris. Hombre. Uy, macho. Incluso la ha invitado ya a París. He's even invited her to Paris. He's even invited her to Paris. However, he's a little afraid. What's afraid? Miedoso. Que tiene miedo. Tiene un poco de miedo, dice. He is a little afraid, or a little bit afraid. He's a little afraid of having. Okay. Tiene miedo de tener una relación más seria. He's a little bit afraid of having a more serious relationship. He's a little afraid of having. He's a little afraid of, are you afraid of flying? Alguna gente tiene miedo de volar. Are you afraid of flying, Marta? No? Okay. Afraid of flying. Yes. And he's afraid of having a more serious relationship with Inés because he doesn't understand her. He doesn't understand the character, el temperamento y carácter de los sevillanos o de la gente del sur, los andaluces. The Andalusians. He doesn't understand the character of the people in the south de Llorón, south of the south of Spain, sobre todo, escucha, especially, con E delante, aquí sí, especially in Seville. It is true. The people in Seville are difficult to understand. On the surface, they're very open, but I think it's not easy to penetrate the Seville society. It's a little bit closed sometimes, but superficially they're very open. Seville. I like Seville. So he's a little bit afraid of having a more serious relationship with Inés because he doesn't understand. He doesn't understand, and I don't understand either. He doesn't understand the carácter. Pero we stress the first syllable, character, of the people in the south of Spain, especially in Seville. They seem like fun people. Ya parece gente alegre, ¿no? Fun. Fun is divertida. Gente divertida. They seem like, da la impresión de, they seem like fun people who look for ways to enjoy life. Yeah, buscan formas de disfrutar la vida, ¿no? Like Marta. They seem like fun people who look for ways to enjoy life. But he still remembers, todavía recuerda, he still remembers the opera. Fíjate cómo pronunciamos ópera. Opera. Con una A descarada española. Opera. De hecho, un purista diría 3 sílabas. Opera. Pero los nativos decimos opera. An opera. Opera. Like Oprah Winfrey. Opera. He still remembers the opera he saw several years ago in Paris called Carmen de Bizet, by Bizet. In the opera, a young French soldier fell in love with a gypsy girl from Seville. And the poor soldier had all kinds of problems. Inés wasn't a gypsy girl, but sometimes she talked and behaved. A veces hablaba y se comportaba, to behave. Se puede decir act. Sometimes she talked and acted, actuaba, acted, pero se portaba, se comportaba. Sometimes she talked and acted like the actress who played the role, to play. Desempeñar un papel o representar un papel teatral en este caso is to play a role. El rol, los juegos de rol, to play a role. But sometimes Inés talked and behaved like the actress who played the role of Carmen in the opera. Inés had black hair, like the girl in the opera. Dark eyes, like the girl in the opera. Francois found her very attractive. Esta frase, François la encontraba muy atractiva. La encontraba. François, fíjate la F de François y la F de found. François la encontraba, o la encontró. François found her very. Luego la V de very. Trata de decirlo igual que la F de François y found. Como si fueran 3 Fs y no 2 Fs y una V. François found her very, very attractive. Para practicar la V inglesa. Y luego vibras un poco la F tercera de very. François found her very attractive. Tengo que... Bueno, llevo casi desde el primer capítulo tratando de que pronuncies la V en inglés. Como una V. All right. Varios vampiros valencianos vaporizaron, etc. So, François found her very attractive and very different from the girls or than the girls in Paris. Un británico diría, I think, François found her very attractive and very different to the girls in Paris. The Americans, very different from the girls in Paris. Pero a ambos lados decimos than. Es correcto. Muy diferentes que las chicas. No, a las chicas. And he found her very different than the girls in Paris. The last time he spoke to her, he invited her to visit Paris. Since then, Since then, desde entonces, la ha llamado 3 veces. Since then, he's called her. He's called her. He's called her 3 times. But her mobile phone, her cell phone, was disconnected each time. Está apagado o fuera de cobertura, right? He hopes she'll call him. Espera que ella le devuelva la llamada o las llamadas. He hopes she calls him. He hopes that she calls him. Quitamos el that, no es necesario. He hopes she calls him. So, here we have a young man who apparently is falling in love. Apparently, he's falling in love. Is she falling in love too? Maybe. Tomorrow we'll talk a little bit more about this. See you tomorrow.